I think that the advent of the computer, first of all, and then the smartphone has changed the texture of faith, of the church, of the family, of romance, of integrity, of character. And it has weaseled its way in, as one of my students said, almost like a giant python squashing the life out of us. It has dominated everything. I can't ride through the city and stop at any given corner. Every person on that corner will be looking at a phone. They won't be talking to each other. They don't be looking at the weird people on the street. They don't even look at their animals.
Hi, friend. You're listening to Find Hope Here. I'm your host, Teresa Whiting, author, speaker, ministry leader, friend, and fellow struggler. This is a podcast about the messy, complicated, painful parts of life, but also the beautiful, joy-filled hope that Jesus promises. Each week, we dig deep into God's Word together and talk about how His truth impacts our everyday lives. I'm not going to ask you to sit with me and have coffee because I seem to have my best conversations while I'm just doing life. So I'd love to hang out with you as you walk or fold laundry or drive to work. You're invited to join me in pursuing the hope God promises. No matter where you are or where you've been, I pray you always find hope here. Let's jump into today's episode. We are in for such a treat today. I have Dr. Rosalie DesRosiers on the program. She has been a professor at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago for 55 years. She has poured into the lives of her students on every level. She's a passionate teacher, communicator, master of literature, and student of God's Word. For the past 15 years, she has been requiring of her students a 48-hour media fast, and she has compiled the results of their experiences. Her findings are astonishing. I wanted to have Dr. DesRosiers on to talk about what she has seen technology do in the lives of students and individuals, and really our society as a whole. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to forgive the sound quality of this episode. See, I was so excited about having this conversation that I forgot to press record. Then, when I finally did press record, I realized I had my microphone on the wrong settings. But please don't tune out, because what we share in this episode is so critical. Well, friends, I am excited to welcome you to today's episode with Dr. Rosalie DesRosiers. We have been anticipating this conversation for a long time. So, Rosie, if you would, tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you do, and possibly a fun fact.
Well, I was born and raised in Peru. My parents were missionaries there for 42 years, church planters, very simple missionaries, went out with almost no money on a boat during World War II with my two older siblings and walked the streets to listen to the language, to learn it. And that really is the truth. It's hard to believe. Nobody can believe that when I say that. I came back to the United States to start high school, lived with my grandmother, and they would come in and out, of course, on furlough. I went to Bryan College after high school and studied English. And when it was over, it was 1969, and it was an unsophisticated time. I picked a big city and came and applied at Moody. And they gave me, because it was an unsophisticated time, a job in radio, where I was a writer for spots and programs and did a little bit of work on-air work. And then when I was 22, they had an opening in the English department, in the communications department, and they looked around for anybody with an English degree, and I was anybody. None of this would ever happen. This is all divinely engineered. And I got the job and part-time, just a class a semester, and I loved it so much. I felt like I had come home to some magic in my life. And they said, go get your master's degree. And I got my master's degree at night and was hired full-time special instructor in 76, and then got my MDiv and my PhD after that. And 55 years later, I am now retired for 2 years, but I teach 2 courses a semester still with great delight.
Yes, and great delight to the students, I would add, because I know how much they love you. And I feel like you've made such an impact, not just academically, but spiritually and relationally in their lives. But today we're talking about technology. And as you said, you've been here for 55 years. And so you have seen changes of all kinds throughout the years. And specifically, we want to talk about the changes you've seen since the smartphones, since computers, since we've entered this digital age. But why? Why are you so passionate about this topic?
Because I think it has everything to do with your spiritual life. I think that the advent of the computer, first of all, and then the smartphone, very crucially in 2008, I guess is when it took off, has changed the texture of faith, of the church, of the family, of romance, of integrity, of character. And it has weaseled its way in, as one of my students said, almost like a giant python squashing the life out of us. It's always been true of the evangelical church that we push things off for a long time, and all of a sudden we just absorb them. It was that way with television. I had lots to say about television too. And now I'm really kind of sick about how far it's gone, how little preaching I have heard on it. There are lots of books written, and nobody has any excuse for not knowing what technology has done to people and to the family. No more books even need to be written. It's so bad, the changing of the brain. No young person should have a phone before they're 16, says Jonathan Haidt. Little children on screens are being damaged terribly. But with my students, it caught up with me, and I realized that the computer, I hadn't even thought about it, but there were a smattering of computers in the classroom, and I thought, oh, they're probably taking notes. I didn't even think about it. And then a student came up to me one day after a literature class and said, I don't know if you know this, and I hate to rat on him, but he's playing games, and it's distracting to the people behind him. I was sort of stunned. First of all, at the audacity he had to do that. But then I remembered I wrote letters in classes when I was in college. It was just a different kind of technology. And I immediately ended any computers in the classroom. And to this day, I have that rule, except for people with accommodations or somebody who has something that they take notes on that there's no internet on, I guess, or they don't even think about bringing their computers. Then came the phone, and I probably allowed it, not realizing, and would hear it go off once in a while. Then my sister-in-law, who's a professor, said to me she takes them all up at the beginning of her class and puts them in a basket. And then they come and get them afterwards. And I thought, nah, this has got to go. And so the phone went. But then I thought, and I have no idea where I thought about the fast. And then, of course, as is my wont, I made it a huge fast. So they did 4.5 days, my English students. I only applied it to my English students and at the time. And 4.5 days, I started in the fall of 2009. And I said 4.5 days. And everybody said to me, it'll never happen.
You're talking about a media fast.
A media fast. And these are the rules for the media fast. They couldn't use Facebook or any other such venue, use internet for any reason other than classwork, use email for any reason other than to contact a professor, text anyone, including your main squeeze and your family. Distance may make the heart grow fonder. And I told them, I said, you tell your parents it's time for you not to hover over me anymore. I'm not going to be in touch. Your brothers, your sisters, your long lost friends in Hong Kong. I don't care. Watch television. Use your cell phone for any reason that does not include work, business, necessary communication, and that only applies to husbands and wives. That's the only necessary communication. Keep it at a minimum, and keep that at a minimum. Play video games, listen to music on any form you have. And I say any gizmo you do this on unless it's required for a music class. And you can't watch movies on the computer or go to the theater actively. In addition to that, they were to journal the experience from beginning to end and then turn that in a written paper.
So you've been doing this media fast for
2009. How long is that? 19, that's 15, 16 years. And then I got the journals and they were graded assignments. And then after that, at some point I could start collecting them, which I can't believe I'm so glad I did. Standard now, every literature class does a 48-hour fast. At some point during the semester, I assign it. And my Theology of Sin and Literature does it twice because I want them to understand the concept of sin and the use of the cell phone or how it can be related. And they do one at the beginning and one at the end. So I now have about 270 pages of collected reports about that. And a few years ago, I had a student who was down on her luck and needed some work. She was very bright. And I paid her to collect them all in as many categories as she could find. I had some ideas. The categories there are a lot of categories. And that's what I have to synthesize. I know the family. You suggested sacred space, using a cell phone during church. And I could talk a long time about that. And you may ask me more about that. Romance, what it's done to romance and dating, the relationship between couples, anxiety, and music is a huge issue.
Wow. So as you've kind of observed what has happened over the years and how this technology has really transformed the lives, like the whole lives, you're talking about family,
everything,
anxiety, that's their internal world, their external world, relationships. Talk a little bit more about some of the big themes that have come out in your findings.
Well, it's stunning what it's done to the family. I think the devil found the perfect instrument that can be used for good. Please understand me. I understand that the computer and the cell phone is here to stay. I don't have any illusions about that. I use it. I have my first iPhone, and I've had to use computer at Moody for years and years and years, and I have it for personal use. But nobody ever said that didn't have to have boundaries. It has dominated everything. I can't ride through the city and stop at any given corner. Every person on that corner will be looking at a phone. They won't be talking to each other. They don't be looking at the weird people on the street. They don't even look at their animals when they walk them anymore. They're on their phone with the animal, which makes me so sad. And one of the saddest things I've seen is the way mothers roll along with their children looking at their phone, or sit in McDonald's with their children looking at their phone, and those children are looking around like orphans. And even PBS, which isn't exactly a conservative venue, has talked about the new orphanhood of children.
Wow.
We're not forming them anymore. Another big theme is music. Nobody is unwired anymore. Nobody ever so few people go around, young people especially, without earbuds or earphones. And they've said to me, it's an avoidance of people. If I want to avoid people, I just put them in, and then nobody bothers me. And that grows in its addiction. It's completely interrupted the fellowship of students here at Moody with each other. And these are Christian students. I found out that a lot of kids will skip lunch and go to their room so they can watch a movie. The watching of movies is huge. The listening to music is huge. They don't even know what movies they've watched. They just talk movies. When I used to go to a movie, I knew the name. I had discussed it. It was fun. It was unique. It wasn't movies. Mm-hmm. Everything in their life is cluttered. There is no chance for creative activity to be taking place. The imagination is controlled. They talk about music as the soundtrack of their life. So when they have music for their devotional life, I'm not sure we should be listening to music while we're having devotions. They have music for their study life. Maybe that's why it's not going so well. They have music for cleaning the room, but it's music. And that's one of the ones they resist me on the most. I had a student who was not in my class come to me and say, I heard about your fast, and I looked at the rules, and I thought, okay, I understand all these, but I don't understand music. What could be wrong with music? But he said, I decided to do it. And I realized, he said, I have a massive pornography problem. And I realized that music, my being wired 24/7, was keeping me from dealing with the issues which were feeding my porn problem. And I was able to begin to take care of my porn problem when I finally got quiet and let the trouble come in and me know that I had to solve it.
Hey friends, I'm just popping in here with a quick announcement. This is a really exciting week for me. I'm celebrating 2 years as a podcaster. I'm dropping my 100th episode, and it's my birthday this week. So I'm going to ask you for a birthday gift. It's not going to cost you any money, just a couple minutes of your time. Did you know the best gift you can give a podcaster is a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts? As of this recording, I only have about 68 reviews. I would love to get that number to 100 in honor of my 100th episode. If you've been listening to and enjoying this podcast, would you consider leaving a 5-star rating and review? It's one way you can help spread the word about Find Hope Here. See, Apple plays this little game, and it goes like this. If you have lots of reviews, we'll share your podcast with everyone else. And if you don't, we're not going to show it to anyone. Leaving a 5-star rating and review would be a gift to me, and it would be a way for you to partner with me in spreading hope. Thanks, friend. Oh, and if you're not signed up to follow the show, make sure you hit that little plus button at the top right corner of your screen. Wow. I think that is so telling. When you talk about being connected 24/7, I remember when my son and I did a 40-day flip phone challenge. And we weren't, completely off of media, but what I found was white space that has disappeared from my life. There's no quiet, there's no thinking, imagining.
There's no margin.
Yeah.
There's no margin.
Why do you think the students are so desperately trying to keep that constant soundtrack in their heads?
I think that's what they got used to. I think so many parents have not thought through what it means to do it. They handed these cell phones. Jonathan Haidt suggests that you do not give a cell phone to a child till they're 16. Just because of the advent of all the problems that come in. Well, think of how many kids have them by the time they're 7 or 8. So nobody's thought about it. It hasn't been philosophically and theologically considered. What does this mean to my spiritual life? Yes. What does this mean to my imaginative life? It's an addiction. Most of my students come in saying, oh, no, they're not addicted. And they'll say, I didn't believe I was addicted. Most of them say, I was addicted. I am addicted, not it was. And so it's crowding out everything. And so then it becomes, I think I know this as an older woman, having gotten the whole thing in my late 50s, early 60s. I go to the computer too much to check. Sometimes I do a puzzle when I don't need to be doing a puzzle. And I'm moderate. I don't have music on at all. We haven't learned, we don't know how to do leisure anymore. We don't know how to really relax. We think leisure is watching something. Scrolling. What is scrolling? Scrolling is ridiculous waste of God-given time. It's killing time. Think about that metaphor. Killing time. What did we used to do? I can remember my grandmother and my extensive cousins and aunts and uncles, many of whom were missionaries, when we were home together, they'd sit on a bench on the lawn, eating watermelon and talking to each other. Nobody was on a screen. My cousins and I would run around catching fireflies. This was beautiful. It was imaginative. You felt the air. They say that there are kids that don't go out till noon now. They're not even in the outside enough. They're not stirred enough. They're not playing. There's no play going on. They are doing this indirect thing. It all started with Sesame Street years ago, where they said even the mechanisms in the arms were frozen because the kids were watching. And even if the big bird told them to do something, they didn't have to do it. There is no follow through.
Wow.
I could go on and on.
Well, I could listen. And I hope that the listeners are not thinking like, oh, well, you're just of another generation and you don't get it. Because I'll tell you what, I'm a little bit younger than you. I have kids that are college age right now. All of my kids are in their 20s, and they would agree with you. Like, we want to live our life. We don't want to be glued to a screen and have no imagination. And I think that the people that are coming up now are starting to realize it. This is not good. This has not been good for us.
Well, I think some of the schools are beginning to now consider taking, even the very, very liberal schools, taking the screen out of the classroom because it has been such a ruination. They shouldn't give the phones back to the kids at noon. That's the big debate now, because then the kids don't play together. Yeah, to address the generational thing, I teach 18 to 22-year-olds with a few exceptions here and there, and they thank me. They didn't realize, nobody ever made them think about it. And this is their lives. They're going to raise families with this. We've got to teach them to sit with their children at meals with no phones. We've got to teach husbands and wives to sit together without scrolling, to look at each other in restaurants, to be alive to the tips of their fingers and toes. Let's stop this indirect kind of waste that we're doing.
Yes, you mentioned in our earlier conversation, when I forgot to press record, that there is a screen. Talk about that, the screen that you mentioned.
There's the students talk about how there's a screen between them and life. And the screen is the phone. The phone is keeping them from significant conversations, from creative activity. They're not playing their instruments as much. They don't tend to go to the thing which physically demands something of them. They go to the phone which entertains them with their series and their movies. There's too many movies. There's too many series. There's too much music. Nothing is demanding anything of it. And it's culturally teaching them in ways that, frankly, our faith is not competing with.
I've heard you use the term theology of technology. I absolutely love that. And can you explain, what do you mean? What is that? And why is that so important for us to develop something like that?
We have to have a theology of everything we do. We should have a theology of the way we dress. We're in a crisis of immodesty. We should have a theology of the way we eat. We're in a crisis of gluttony. We should have a theology of the way we use our technology. And that means that we consider the impact of how we dress, how we eat, the phone that we're using on our lives, on society, on the church. Technology is more than an object. God is in charge of that choice. I always say to my students, your life is the sum of your choices, and every single choice matters. There are no indifferent choices. It matters what we eat. It matters who we talk to. It matters who our friends are. It matters what we do with the things God has given us. It matters how we spend our money. All of it matters. And if we're not thinking it through rigorously until it becomes a discipline of life, what we're going to be in our 60s is going to be a sad thing. It's run by how we do it, how we begin to do it in our 20s.
I think even as you're saying that, when you're scrolling 24/7, you don't have time to think about what you're eating. It's almost like all of our appetites are dulled and
dulled.
Yeah.
They're absolutely dulled. They're numb. It's as though we have a sedative on our lives. In fact, I've had students say the sky was bluer, the grass was greener, I could feel the air, I could look at people in the eye, I was alive. I haven't been alive.
I'm going to break in and interrupt this episode right here, but I hope you'll come back next week when Rosie shares some really practical ideas on how we can get a hold of our smartphones. If this episode has you thinking about your relationship with your phone and you realize you'd like to make some changes, I have a few resources I've created for you. First is a free download called 24 Ways to Break Up with Your Smartphone. It gives you small, simple steps that you can take today to create a little bit of distance between yourself and your smartphone. Second, I want to recommend that you listen to a couple podcast episodes I did with my friend Sandy Cooper over on the Balanced Momcast. We talked all about the 40-day flip phone challenge that I did with my son Caleb last January. I'll also put a link to that episode. And third, and this is a big one, I'm inviting you to join me for a 28-day flip phone challenge during the month of February. If you're overwhelmed by the constant pool of technology and you're ready to do something about it, this challenge will serve as a reset. You can find the links to all these things, including the free download, the podcast episodes I mentioned, and all the details about the Flip Phone Challenge in the show notes. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today on Find Hope Here. To find anything we mentioned on the episode, go to teresawhiting.com/listen, which is where you can find all the show notes. In closing, I want to leave you with this prayer from Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit, you may abound in hope.